It's happening now, and I think if you think about the path to kind of scale this, everyone's doing agents on these kind of isolated devices. But now you're starting to see companies provide kind of like containerized services for agents. And so literally, these criminals can go to a cloud service provider, leverage, like their cloud agent service, and spin up dozens of these things that are making thousands of dollars a month off of people who think they have a relationship. There is technology is going to enable this at scales that we can't quite appreciate, I think, just yet.
We're going through something absolutely historic.
Technologies across the board are growing exponentially.
It's a disruption that's going to completely redefine the way businesses compete.
In the next decade, we're going to lose 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies.
The exponential growth of computing is continuing.
AI is nowhere near its full potential.
Whether you like it or not, that the future cannot be stopped by anyone.
Welcome back to the Future Tech and Foresight podcast. I'm your AI host, Mark Verbenkoff's deepfake avatar, and this is episode number 232. The digital fraud landscape has shifted from clumsy phishing emails to industrialized AI-powered operations. In this episode, we dive deep into the rapid evolution of modern scams driven by the explosive growth of instant digital payments and highly specialized criminal networks. We explore how bad actors deploy generative AI and deepfakes to scale romance and investment scams, building complex, fake relationships that blur the line between human and machine interaction. We also break down a critical loophole in consumer finance, the massive legal distinction between authorized and unauthorized transactions. Under current regulations like Regulation E, financial institutions are legally required to cover losses from identity theft, but they hold zero liability when a victim is manipulated into authorizing a payment themselves. This regulatory gap has left a massive opening for criminals, making real-time AI-based interception and identity verification tools absolutely vital. Finally, the conversation challenges the common stereotype of the typical scam victim. While older generations suffer the heaviest financial losses, data reveals that younger, tech-savvy demographics are actually falling for modern digital scams at a higher rate. This episode serves as an urgent wake-up call and a blueprint for navigating a world where seeing and hearing is no longer believing. A little bit about today's guest, Al, is a cybersecurity and fraud prevention expert with a unique background rooted in investigative work, inspired by his parents' careers as detectives. After leading fraud detection initiatives across the financial and banking sectors, his pioneering startup focusing on account takeovers and security signal interpretation was successfully acquired by TransUnion. He now leads an advanced real-time scam detection platform designed to intercept fraudulent communications and verify identities across marketplaces and dating applications. Through his work, Al continues to develop custom machine learning architectures to protect consumers from highly automated next-generation digital threats. Perfect. Well, Al, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. Appreciate your time and certainly appreciate the insights that you're going to give into this topic. As I mentioned before the recording, I was hacked recently, so this is in the same realm of discussion, AI and scamming and how to prevent it. So looking forward to get your insights. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, Mark. It's all connected. Happy to talk about it.
Yeah. So why don't you start us off with maybe not your bio, but like how you got involved in the work that you do? Is it AI first? Is it stopping scammers first? What led you into this kind of work?
Yeah. So my parents were actually detectives. Right. I never really planned to be. And over the years, I ended up working in financial services and banking, and I started to get into things like fraud detection within banks. A lot of AI and technology already in that space, and ultimately, I started a company probably about what was it, about 8 years ago or so. It was an AI company actually in the cyberspace, specifically focused on data compromise.
Mm.
We got acquired, rolled up into TransUnion, the credit bureau. And then, like a couple of years later, we started to hear a lot about scams.
Mm.
Right. And so there's a really important distinction because the work we were doing was helping to interpret kind of security related signals so that consumers and their institutions would understand what it meant for things like account takeover, right, or fraud or other things related to their kind of financial safety.
Hmm.
And that's what everyone cared about at the time because, I mean, it was the biggest problem by far. The banks were liable under the law, so they had a lot of incentive.
Right.
But all of a sudden, the scam started to absolutely take off, and nothing really changed from like a liability standpoint. It's just that the volume got to be so significant of people
Mm,
calling and
mm,
complaining and asking for help, and it just started to become overwhelming. And so it felt like the next big problem to solve. Did have some personal, again, experiences in my own life. Actually, one of my parents who were
mm,
affected as well. So,
mhm.
it definitely resonated.
Yeah,
And so that was the driver. I kind of, was moving in that direction my whole career, but there was a bit of an inflection point. You
interesting.
know.
Why was there an increase in scams? Was it
Mm,
like a new technology that enabled these
mm,
bastards to do what it is that they're doing? Was it just,
yeah.
hey, there's a best practice, document that's shared around? What caused this?
Yeah. So I think if I had to pick, if I had to pick a few things, right? I think three is fair. You do like a top
Hmm.
three, right? I think one is so digital payments.
Mm,
Um, right? Because if you're a criminal, you want to find ways to move money quickly. And so the advent of Venmo and Zelle and
mhm.
crypto, I mean, that made it super easy for them to monetize victims very fast.
Right. Right.
Right. And so the timing kind of coincides a bit, right? Actually pretty well.
Mm,
Um, the next big factor I think was the fact that um, the hard targets were getting harder when it came to things like identity theft and fraud.
mm,
Because if you think about it, what a criminal really has to do is like take your identity or your card information or whatever, and then fool financial institutions or merchants. And they had gotten really good at things like stronger authentication and identity.
mm.
And so the returns were kind of diminishing for criminals,
Right.
right? Um, and then finally, scams had begun to it's good to put it. Um, we saw this dynamic that played out over in actually in the fraud space and in the kind of cybersecurity space as well, where criminals, they kind of professionalized, they specialized. There are whole economies that, began
Mm,
to form over time. And that started to play out in the scam space,
mm,
where you started to have these groups that were very, very specialized. They stood up operations like their own call centers, right? And so they were beginning to kind of move in that direction as well. And when that happens, they start to realize really significant efficiencies.
of course.
So it all
Right.
kind of comes together,
Right.
right? And it's easy
Yeah.
for them, like they're easy for them to target people at scale to do it well, right? It's easier for them to move the money when they do. And then when they target an individual, they don't have to put up with all those pesky controls, right? That
Mm,
banks and others are spending billions and billions of dollars on. And so I think all those things started to kind of come together about 5 years ago or so. And I mean, you see that in the data. Every year is a record. Every year is actually scams are literally the most reported crime on the planet Earth.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Unfortunate, but it makes sense. Um, so the volume went up. Did the size of the scams go up, or was it easier to do a smaller scam at a higher volume?
So there's a diversity of scams, right? I think we
Mm,
track like between 20 and 30 different kinds of scams. Um, on the low end, you have toll scams, so you get that, hey, you didn't pay your easy pass or you owe $2 to the Ohio State Turnpike or whatever. Really what they're trying to do is get your card data so they can
mm,
put it on a wallet somewhere in China, right? I mean,
mm,
from a consumer perspective, that's relatively low impact. But, to your question, over the last few years, um, the kind of more expensive and impactful scams have um, become much more ubiquitous.
mm.
So if you look at the data, the two most common types of data, if you just look at losses, are romance scams and investment scams. If you
Interesting.
FTC data nationally and at the state level, it's the same everywhere.
Mm, mm,
Um, so I mean, what criminals did is they kind of took that a step further and it's what they call pig butchering, which is basically it's an unfortunate, use of a Chinese term for kind of like fattening and slaughtering an animal.
right.
So it's like a long con. Usually starts innocently, right? And then they take a little bit of money from you at a time, more and more and more, right? And then they go for the kill, and then those amounts can be significant,
Mm,
right? 6, 7 figures. Those became really really popular over the last few years. which, again, while romance scams and investment scams were already big issues, these were kind of like they took the worst of all worlds, put them together. Sometimes
Mm.
they're investment related, sometimes they're not, but it really plays on human psychology and emotion very, very well. Um, yeah, that is like a whole conversation in and of
Yeah,
itself,
yeah.
Mark. That's again this relatively new phenomenon in the scam space.
Hmm. And like it sounds like a pretty sophisticated operation for some of these larger ones, whereas these, my experience with scams themselves is very small. Like I've also had family members that have been scammed out for, a few $1,000s, so it's not like, a couple pennies here and there. Um, but I think they were using like some sort of AI deep fake voice, but I still think that you need to have some like competent people on the other end for some of these larger ones, or very competent people on the other end for some of these larger ones. But for these smaller scams, I think we've all seen those viral videos of the white hat hacker screwing over the Indian scammer, whatever it is, the card redeeming scam that I don't fully understand it. But to me, that doesn't sound like it's a very sophisticated level of an operation. Maybe it's more so now, but I guess my question is, has so the scale and the volume have gone up? Are the people going into this also becoming more sophisticated at the both ends of the scam game here, of the diversity?
Yeah. So, I mean, the application of technology is becoming much more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for lack of a better word. Obviously, we're talking about victimization, so it's not.
Mm-hmm.
There's far more to be said there. But I'll give you some examples. So, just kind of keying in on the one that you cited, where you have the call center, and they're calling about tech support scam, about tech
Yeah.
support or taxes due or whatever. Um, so yeah, there are call centers filled with people. Some of them are people actually getting paid. Some of them are actually human trafficking victims, which
Mm-hmm.
again is a whole thing in and of itself. But what we're beginning to see now is the availability of services where it's essentially AI making the call and having the conversations,
Right.
whether by voice or chat.
Right.
So now standing in for the person, which again, when you think about it, it allows them to be much more efficient, to scale, to be much harder to shut down.
Mm.
So that's one of the things that they've had to contend with a bit lately, where governments in Southeast Asia, especially, want to seem like they're on the right side of the law. So they've begun shutting down some of these centers.
Mm-hmm.
So by virtue of kind of going digital and leveraging AI, they can make their footprint much smaller, which makes them much harder to shut down ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
So they are becoming more sophisticated that way. There's also another phenomenon, like, and this really blurs the lines. So the I'm sure you've already, dabbled in it. You've probably talked about it before on a podcast, but AI agents.
Sure. Sure.
So, what we've begun to see is this blurring of the lines where people are creating um, these identities with AI agents, and they're like self-contained people,
Mm-hmm.
where they have an identity, social profile, different communication channels they can speak through, like Telegram and others, right? Because that's how the agents work. They actually can connect to these
Right.
different
Right.
communication platforms, and they're creating like, again, for lack of a better term, like virtual girlfriends or virtual boyfriends. And then they're going out onto social platforms and other kind of adult oriented platforms, and they're soliciting people, right? They're getting sugar daddies and sugar mamas, and people are paying them for photos and videos to be their girlfriend, to call them, to talk to them. They
Crazy.
don't know that it's a machine.
Right. Right.
But I mean, is that a scam? I mean, I mean, in some respects, you would say it is, right? Because they don't know it's a real person. But I kind of feel like that line is getting a little fuzzy
Right.
by virtue too. So if you're trying to figure out like how technology is working its way into the scam space, I mean, that is a really, really interesting example of where we're headed.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, it seems like the person that's getting scammed is still getting the same value that they would if they were talking to a human if it's online. So, yeah, that's gross and interesting at the same time. Wow. And this is only going to get more ubiquitous over time because these AI agents are already pretty good and they've only been out for a little while. So I can only imagine in a couple of years when they get, much more sophisticated, they're able to communicate over different methods, not just, text or email. Maybe they can even have some sort of, we use HeyGen to create a deep fake avatar of me to give the intro to this podcast, right? And it's obvious, like you can still tell most of the time. Like sometimes I have a British accent. It's not perfect every time, but it's pretty good, and it's getting better over time. So I can only imagine the next couple of years you could have a full-on conversation with your AI deepfake scam girlfriend or non-girlfriend. Yeah, it's a wacky world we're moving into.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's happening now, and
Yeah.
I think if you think about the path to kind of scale this, everyone's doing agents on these kind of isolated devices. So that's why there's like big run on Mac Minis.
Yes.
But now you're starting to see, companies provide kind of like containerized services for agents. And so literally, I mean, these criminals can go to a cloud service provider, leverage, like their cloud agent service and spin up dozens of these things that are
Right.
making thousands of dollars a month off of people who think they have a relationship. I mean, and if you know anything about how that whole industry works, it was already kind of moving in that direction.
Mm.
So yeah,
Mm.
it's only gonna get worse. There is
Mm.
technology is gonna enable this at scales that, we can't quite appreciate, I think, just yet.
Yeah, and then all the kind of the second order ramifications that happen throughout society with this, right? Like there's all like maybe it's not there yet, but in Korea, I can't remember the exact time frame, but like there's not going to be South Koreans in the next 100 years or something like that because
Yeah.
the population is just not getting replenished. And if yeah, we've talked about like sex bots on the podcast, maybe last year or so. So there's all of these things are connected in how the social ramifications come about. But if these scammers are going to become more and more sophisticated, it's just another drop in this big bucket of technology that is potentially harming or definitely harming people. Um, let's move away from the negative. Let's maybe touch on the positive, which is obviously a little bit more in your realm. Uh, okay, so obviously AI is also becoming useful to spot these scams, stop them. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an insight into how this has progressed over the last couple of years, because ChatGPT is only 3 years old, 3.5 years old now, right? I remember.
2022, I think.
Okay, yeah, so the November end of November, end of October 2022.
Yeah, I think it was 22.
Okay, so
Um,
almost 4 years, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think kind of maybe just line of demarcation here. Um, I think the advent of generative and diffusion AI has been a game changer in so many different ways, right? And the game changer for criminals too, because it allows them to do things at scale that they couldn't do easily or well before. Now that being said, AI has been used in the fraud and security space for a long time,
Right, right.
right? So neural networks were used back in the 90s by banks to decision things at scale, and so there's plenty of experience and application there. I think what hasn't necessarily been done though is leveraging that to address the scam issue because the financial incentives weren't there. Right. So I want to kind of come back to that.
Mm,
So like if you get ripped off today, let's say a criminal gets your identity, they get access to your bank account or your retirement account and they move 50 grand. Under US law, right, there are regulations like Regulation E that require the institution to give you your money back.
mm,
So because of that, obviously, banks and others have all these AI-based systems in place to detect that kind of activity, whether it's at the transaction level, the authentication level, whatever. But with scams, they have no liability. And so by virtue, they haven't applied that same technology to
mm.
solving the scam issue whatsoever.
Interesting.
And like really, I mean, and I used to
Yeah.
work in banking, so I can tell you like the depths to which they did not care. Yeah, it's pretty absolute. And so now, I mean, they really have started to take a super keen interest, and we're actually starting to see regulatory change. So, we use AI ourselves. We actually don't use generative AI.
Mm.
Part of the reason why is two part. Number one, banks aren't ready for it. They're worried about kind of like the regulatory and privacy related implications, but there's also security risks given what we do. So what we're trying to do is help you discern in real time whether or not you're being scammed. And the problem, well, I'll give you one example of why generative AI can be an issue. If you get an email or a text message or a DM from somebody, and I'm like out there protecting you in real time, trying to read all this stuff and analyze and give you insights before you act, um, criminals could bake basically kind of like hidden instructions,
Right.
right, in those communications. And those are the kinds of things that could break my back end, or even just could lead to incorrect results. And
Mhm.
that problem actually hasn't been solved. Injection attacks have not been solved in the generative AI space yet from a security perspective. And so, it's not ready to address the problem that we tackle in the way that we do it. And so, we still use AI. We have our own kind of custom machine learning models, for every market, every language, every channel, all that kind of stuff. But no generative AI. Kind of much more traditional, which means it costs me a lot more money, time, energy, that kind of stuff. But it's a necessity. So the fact that criminals have this stuff to use at their fingertips, um, is you know I don't know, it's making everything worse. But I think there's an opportunity for us to apply AI like we've been doing elsewhere, and to make a difference for the better too. So there's a lot of room for us to improve, and a
Right.
lot of tools for us to do that too. So we can definitely catch up.
Yeah, and it kind of seems also like it's a forever cat and mouse game. So your yeah, right. Your tools, the AIs that you're employing are just forever needing to be improved and evolved and shifted in certain ways. Could you talk a little bit about like what it is that your service is actually providing, like real time, like how do you help somebody understand that they're potentially being scammed? It's very, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, two simple ways to think about it is that we're trying to get ahead of the communications.
Mm.
So when they're reaching out to you, again, it could be regular text-based communications, email, text message, DMs, it could be video. I mean, whatever it happens to be where they're trying to interact with you, we try to, again, in an automated fashion, be there to intercept using AI to tell you in that moment, hey, this looks like a scam, and let's tell you why.
Mm,
So that we stop trust from being built with the scammer, because that's what they want.
right.
They want to begin to build that trust. So ultimately, when it comes time to transact, you believe them over your friends and family or the bank, right? Or even your own kind of good judgment.
Mhm.
So catch it early, let you know why. And so, that way you're super well informed and the scammer doesn't stand a chance. The other thing we can help you do, and I think this is, and it sounds a little glib, but I mean, if we knew we were sending money to scammers, we wouldn't send it.
Yeah.
So it's an identity issue. And so the other thing we can do is we can tell you, whether or not the person you're talking to is who they claim to be. So this is different than like, if you go online and look someone up on Spokio or whatever, or Google, not to cast aspersions, but I mean, that stuff it might tell you that that person exists, maybe,
Mm,
but it doesn't tell you if you're talking to that person. So we
right.
can also tell you whether or not, when you're buying tickets on the Facebook Marketplace, or you
Mhm.
met someone on Match.com, like if they really are who they claim to be, because that solves like 99% of the issue.
Right.
I mean, these folks are they're in Cambodia or Laos. They're standing up, these centers in Africa, in the Caribbean.
Mm,
A lot of them, they're not down the street.
right.
You know, So those are the two things we do, and then we partner with the companies who have the infrastructure and the incentive to ultimately get this technology to you. So
Mhm.
we partner with the banks, and we partner with telecom providers and with insurers and others, so that they can pass that technology through to you. Right, protects you, protects them. So that's really what we do from a technology perspective. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we kind of put around it. But
Mm,
if we could stop the bad stuff from getting to you, and in those cases where you've engaged with the scammer, so think like the marketplaces and dating sites, we can give you the insight into who they are.
mhm.
That covers a lot
Right. Right.
from a scam perspective. And so,
Very interesting. Yeah, yeah, because I'm also thinking about the time that like my family member was scammed. The scammer was impersonating me. I was traveling in Latin America at the time, and I was on a bus without any internet, and the scammer claimed to be me. It's like, hey, send me some money because X, Y, and Z. I'm in trouble or something like that. But it was clearly not from the Latin American country. It was, actually another place in Canada. So if my family member had noticed, oh, well, this is weird. Like, why is Mark communicating from Canada, even though I know that he's in South America right now? Um, I guess that breaks the trust, or at least brings a questionable doubt in somebody's mind. So you don't transfer, a couple grand out to some nefarious actor. Um, there's also something else, the type of people that are being scammed, right? Like I'm almost 40, so I'm old now, but um, I'm pretty aware, I think, of the type of scams that are out there. Maybe I'm not, perfect, and maybe it can happen, but I'm just skeptical about anybody sending me anything that's not something that I've already set up a communication for. So my level of trust is already very low when it comes to new inbound messages. Um, I'm assuming that scams typically target older people, and I think I've also heard it's people that are going through like a emotionally turbulent time, like people who have passed away recently is like kind of a big target on somebody's back. Is that the case?
So if you're talking about it from just a pure kind of like incidence rate perspective,
Hmm.
actually it's not.
Oh,
Um, younger people are 3 times more likely to be scammed than older people.
oh, okay,
Now,
interesting.
the amount lost is meaningfully different, right? We're talking
Right,
extra zeros.
right.
And that's really, I think, why so much attention is placed on that for older people. Is that the impact is just outsized.
Hmm.
The average scam affecting a pensioner, a romance scam affecting a pensioner, loss is like $50,000.
The
The average
average,
retirement is about $500,000. So
right?
they literally get their retirement decimated, right?
Yeah,
Take the literal translation of the word out of a dictionary.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I mean that's hard. Whereas younger people, they get scammed buying things off of like Poshmark. That's not, it's not to the same level of
Yeah.
impact in the least. It's also the kinds of things that happen much more often in their lives because they're very digitally engaged.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they're also much more likely to be, they're much less likely to be reported, because they're not impactful. And that's actually true for scams almost across the board because people tend to
Hmm.
be ashamed, and afraid. But if you're out $50, I mean, really,
Well,
I
there's
don't think
also,
who
yeah. Why
cares?
would you probably don't want to tell people because then you feel like a bit of an idiot, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone could be scammed. I mean, I've known PhDs, I've known security professionals. Um, even if you think like, look, I've already been kind of engaging with this person, this makes sense. They'll hack your email, and or they'll hack the person you're talking to, hack their email, set up auto forwarding.
Mhm.
So, the person you think you're talking to never even sees it. Meanwhile, you're getting legitimate communications from their email inbox. Right? So
Fascinating.
there is, there is no kind of, I think, perfect system from an intuition standpoint for
Mm.
catching these things. If they really, really want you,
But I can
they
get
will
you.
find a way to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And I've also heard there are like maybe not seasons, but there's new scams that kind of come up and they become like a trending scam. Is this is the rate of new scams increasing since generative AI has come onto the scene? Because like I use ChatGPT every single day and it's great for brainstorming and coming up with new ideas.
Yeah. No, so it's a good question. I think the answer is probably yes.
Hmm.
I used to run a research firm for a short while. Well, not
Okay.
for like 7 years.
Mhm.
Um, so I tend to qualify things if I don't have data. I think anecdotally, I'd say that's probably the case. And the reason I'd say that is that, you know, AI has made it, kind of much easier to kind of perfect and scale
Hmm.
scams,
Hmm.
right? And like, and why that's so meaningful, I think, is because, if they do enough of these frequently enough, and they're successful frequently enough, eventually people catch on.
Right, right.
And not just like the victims, but also like the other players in the ecosystem who get affected by it. So if you think about those toll scams, while you may only be out $2, the credit card companies are going to be liable for those kinds of transactions ultimately down the line.
Mhm.
So, they became hyper aware of what was happening, right? And then the networks became aware, then the manufacturers of the devices became so, the more successful they are more quickly, the faster it kind of fades. And so by virtue, yeah, they do need to cycle through
Mhm.
scams a little bit more quickly than they did before. But that's not to say like they all go away. It's just that there's some that they lean into more
Mm.
as they kind of get better and perfect them. Um, and then there are some that are just kind of evergreen, right? I think things like romance scams and investment scams are just.
Always gonna
I
be
mean,
there.
those have always been with us.
Yeah, yeah,
They just moved online,
yeah.
right?
Interesting. So what can people? I mean, you're kind of painting a dark picture here, Al, and you're not the first person to come onto the podcast to paint that picture. Apart from using your services, of course, what can people do to help themselves avoid getting scammed in this new age that we're finding ourselves in?
Well, to be clear, we don't do late night infomercials, and we're not. I don't really make my money that way.
Okay.
So this is simply on the basis of experience. Um, so what can you do? I think number one, I mean, I'm gonna start with your kind of take on things, which is to be skeptical of
Mm,
everything. Doesn't matter what channel it comes in anymore. I think that's part of the issue we saw over the last year with like deep fakes and romance and investment scams. People, a lot of people are taking video for granted
mm,
because they didn't realize how good all that stuff has gotten even within the
mm,
last year.
mm.
So if it doesn't matter what channel it comes through, doesn't matter who it is, always be ready, for a potential scam, unless they're standing right in front of you and you've known them forever. Um, be skeptical. I think that is, first and foremost the thing to do. Um, I guess the other piece of kind of more generic advice is that I think people need to understand the difference between unauthorized and authorized payments, right? Is not to get wonkish, but when a criminal like takes your identity and then conducts a transaction, steals your card, accesses your account, and moves that money, whatever the circumstances are, when they're trying to be you, you are not liable.
Mhm.
When you do it because they've convinced you to do it, you are liable.
Mm.
And so all the stuff that we've been telling people from a security perspective to do to stay safe, change your password, use two-factor authentication, right? Like that stuff is really designed to stop unauthorized transactions from happening, right? The ones that the criminal is taking your credentials, logging in, and moving money. Unauthorized stuff. That's on them. When
Mhm.
you're authorizing it, you know, that's on you, and all of those security controls really don't make a difference because you know the answers, right? They're your passwords. It's your 2FA, right? Going to your phone.
Right. Right.
You're just being convinced to send it. So, that's why that whole idea of being really skeptical, questioning everything you're seeing, using the tools at your disposal. I mean, whether it's our tools or anyone else's, to just get the truth before you act is critically important because if you make that mistake, you're out.
Right. Right.
It's the number of cases where people get their money back, is just absolutely dwarfed by the number of cases where people get nothing. So I think that's the most important thing by far for people to understand. Internalize that as a starting point,
Right.
then you're gonna be a lot more careful going forward. But because we're so used to getting our money back, zero fraud guarantees and all the rest of it, that's why the institutions are so panicked now because everyone's calling them.
Mm.
Oh, someone took my money. Oh, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't know who they were. People are calling 7, 8, 9, 10 times. They're leaving the institutions because no one's getting their money back, but they
Right.
all thought they would.
Right.
So if
Right.
you start from that basis, I think you're going to be a lot more careful. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Internalize. You know,
More responsibility on the individual.
yeah.
Great. Should we talk a little bit about the future and how things are gonna pan pan out? I mean, we kind of touched on it before. Um, if I'm understanding correctly, with the use of AI and maybe many other tools, the amount of scams is just going to continue to grow. The volume, the scale, the sophistication of them is going to grow. Your services and the people in your industry are also going to grow, maybe exponentially in the amount of anti-scam activities that you are going to do. It's a bit of a cat and mouse game here. Um, are scammers going to continue to I guess you kind of already touched on this with this AI girlfriend where the lines are blurring. Maybe a better question is, are there any other places where you're seeing these boundaries disappearing between scams and kind of, a normal service?
No, I mean, it actually is an interesting kind of point, where, as a crime, there's a pretty considerable chance that those things get normalized and legalized,
Yeah.
as long as they disclose it, so I think that's going to be the caveat. But no, I think for a lot of the rest of this stuff, I mean, they're still straight up confidence games.
Hmm.
Um, so, go back 100 years, if they really weren't any different. It's someone pretending to be someone they're not with something that they don't actually even have, to get you to give them your money willingly.
Yeah.
I don't think we legalize that stuff, really anytime soon. So no, I think that's the one I think is potentially very, very problematic and relatively near term. But yeah, I mean, AI is just going to make everything, so much more difficult to detect, at
Yeah.
least by people, right? That's the catch. So
Yeah.
it's not that like it's stuff's going to be there's going to be so much more. And it's going to be so overwhelming because the volume's going to be everywhere in every channel. And I think the issue is if we don't apply technology on the other side of it, that's where we risk exposing ourselves just as a society.
Hmm.
So yes, I think it's great to internalize the idea that you need to be responsible, but that doesn't like obviate the need for industry and government to do things with technology to get ahead of it and try to stop it because left unchecked, then it becomes absolutely overwhelming. But we need filters in
Yeah.
place, right? We need help being able to discern things, where it's, you can see that check mark, right? That sign of trust, that thing that lets you know that in this channel, I am safer than I am in another channel. Like that stuff has to continue to manifest in all the places we communicate. It can't be like laissez-faire, hands off, you know, people are solely responsible, because then it's the Wild West and it will just be a total mess, you know.
Right. Right. And do you see like certain industries maybe being targeted more than others? I mean, there's obviously romance and the investment, but like I'm also thinking, I can't remember the name of it, but there was this company that was like, I don't know if it was their CFO or there was a deep fake that was made and then the finance person transferred to like $5 million or something like that. Uh,
25.
25. Well, okay, a little bit off. Um, like are those type of businesses going to be targeted more, or it was just kind of a lucky, proper scam that was set up in that sense?
No, I think, the risk profile of businesses is a little bit different than that of an individual.
Hmm.
And you have LinkedIn profiles, company websites, press releases. A lot of your quote unquote business is
Hmm.
online, so it
Hmm.
makes it easier for the bad guys to target and impersonate. Um, but that's also prompted a response from technology companies. So for example, now with Microsoft, they've added an authentication capability specifically in Teams where if someone's saying they're from bank XYZ, you're going to have the ability to know in Teams whether that call is really coming from bank XYZ. And that's new, right? Because they're
Right.
starting to see these deep fakes of video and they're trying to get people away to know, right?
Mm.
Is that
Mm.
channel legit? Right? Is it coming from the right place? Um, and it makes sense because Microsoft wants to sell all these businesses, MS365 licenses and the rest. So there's financial incentive
Right.
for them to
Right.
provide
Right.
those. But criminals go where the money is. they find the soft spot, they lean in. The businesses are going to be targeted for very clear reasons, especially with cyber insurance being so quick to pay out. I don't think that goes away, but the whole um, the effort by Microsoft here in the near term to shore up teams is just a really good example of what happens when you have financial incentive.
Right. So it sounds like the key, you've said this a couple times, when there's financial incentive, that's where things are going to change. That's where these kinds of blocks, barriers, protections are going to be implemented. And everywhere else is, you got to be a little bit more responsible.
Yeah, that's what, and I mean, I would say choose on the basis of safety.
Mm,
If you're a consumer, choose to do business on platforms where the security is better. Whether they're platforms for moving money or platforms for communicating. I mean, that is going to be one of the best possible defenses for you as an individual to stay safe. Because I'm going to tell you, a lot of them are still right now just leaving it to you, and that's exactly where the criminals go. 100%. It's those platforms, those communication channels, those DM platforms, right? They're moving money on those rails because they know no one's watching, no one cares.
right. Interesting. Well, I think it's I mean, as I say on this podcast all the time, it's a fascinating, but it's also a terrifying future that we're moving into. I guess just like any other time, but it always seems new when it's your future, right? Al, is there anything that I should have asked you in this conversation that I didn't, that you would like to leave with the audience?
Um, you know, um, I really just think it's an inflection point like any other.
Yeah.
That's not so. I just not so much a question to ask, but I don't want to leave this all like doom and gloom. That's just kind of where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
But the incentives are starting to go and be put in place for us to make things better. So just kind of be aware of where we are, right? Look for providers who care,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to fix things. So listen, in like 5 or 10 years, it'll be something else.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's always listen. That's job security for you. There's always something new
Yes.
in the future, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, it's not the end. It's actually just the beginning, but we got it covered.
Perfect place to end. Al, thanks so much for coming on. We'll have your website up on the show notes and your LinkedIn. Is there any other place that you want people to reach out or follow what you're up to?
Um, I mean, we've got all the usual social channels, but no, I think those work.
Perfect. Thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us.
Well, thanks for listening to this week's Future Tech and Foresight podcast. If you like what you've heard here, there are, of course, a number of ways that you can support the podcast. The best way would be to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or give a rating on Spotify, which you can find a step-by-step explanation for on the futuretechandforesight.com website. Alternatively, feel free to leave a comment either on the episode show notes or the YouTube channel where you can see video recordings of the interviews. And finally, if you are part of an organization that is aware of the disruptive and transformational impact that emerging and future technologies will bring and want to know more, please get in touch to hear about the strategic foresight services that we offer and how we can help future-proof your organization and take advantage of the phenomenal opportunities available to survive and thrive in the future.
A lot of future-shocked people and future-shocked institutions in our society are simply overwhelmed.
Once there is superintelligence, the fate of humanity may depend on what the superintelligence does.
Science fact is catching up to science fiction.
The first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity needs to make.
The only scarcity that will exist in the future is that which we decide to create ourselves as humans.
Within a 10-year design revolution, we can have all humanity living the highest standard of living anybody's ever known.
Progress is accelerating at an exponential pace, and it's going to reach a point where progress is so fast it's going to be a singularity.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens.
Every single headline points to the birth pangs of a Type 1 civilization.